Fans, hold on to this. Roy Keane has once again taken a shot at our king, Alan Shearer. And the line was straight to the point. I don't like malicious people. Yes, after more than 20 years, he still holds a grudge from that historic clash against Newcastle. I'm Rodrigo, and you're watching Newcastle Mania, the channel made by fans, for fans passionate about Newcastle United. You blinked, and Newcastle is suddenly all over the headlines. Today, we're diving into this rivalry that never dies, Alan Shearer versus Roy Keane, a story that started back in 2001 and is still sparking flames in 2025. But first, just a quick word. If you love Newcastle and want to keep up with everything happening at our club, hit that subscribe button now. It costs nothing, helps a lot, and makes a huge difference for our black and white community. Once again, Roy Keane has spoken out and didn't hold back. In a recent interview, the former Manchester United captain said Alan Shearer was sneaky, gave hidden elbows, and that he doesn't respect malicious players. Fans, this is basically throwing petrol on a rivalry that's already historic in the Premier League. Keane was discussing Harry Kane and Alan Shearer, two giants of English football history. At first, it sounded like a normal analysis. He claimed that England's current captain is a more complete striker than our eternal number 9. And of course, fans, everyone is entitled to an opinion. Shearer and Kane are names that spark debate at any table. But Keane didn't stop at that technical comparison. He went further. With that direct and provocative style he's always had, he reminded everyone of the heated days in the Premier League and said, I didn't admire Shearer. He was unpleasant, with sneaky elbows, hidden moves, and I don't like malicious people. Strong words, especially coming from someone known for being one of the toughest, most explosive, and often aggressive players in the league. It's almost ironic. Roy Keane, famous for hard tackles, red cards, and even admitting he made fouls to hurt, now accusing Shearer of being underhanded. And this is where the statement really hits hard, because it's not just a comparison with Harry Kane, it's a direct strike at Shearer's image as a leader and legend. For Keane, Shearer wasn't just a rival. He was a player who played with malice, who used sneaky tactics, something Keane believes doesn't deserve respect. Comments like this reopen an old wound. After all, we're talking about two legendary captains, Shearer leading Newcastle, Keane leading Manchester United, two giants who face off in historic matches, in an era where every detail, every provocation, could spark a fight. And when Keane chooses words like unpleasant, sneaky, malicious, he's not just describing a style of play, he's stirring memories of a rivalry that defined a whole generation of fans. It's almost as if he's saying, Shearer may be your idol, but I never respected him as a player. Fans, imagine the scene. More than 20 years after that red card at St. James Park, Keane still holds these sharp words. It shows just how much Shearer really got under his skin. Not just for talent, but for that strong personality that never backed down. And that detail is what turns his statement into something much bigger than a simple striker comparison. And as you can imagine, the reaction was massive, and not just in Newcastle. On social media, fans flooded the comments defending Shearer with everything they had. It wasn't just about the goals, and there were plenty of them, but about everything he represented. Leadership on the pitch, loyalty to choose Newcastle over giants like Manchester United, and being the eternal symbol of the city. Many fans took shots back at Roy Keane, saying things like, better to be a little malicious on the pitch than spend your career collecting red cards or losing your temper. Right, Keane? A nod to Keane's notorious red cards and controversies. Others pointed out that if Shearer were truly just unpleasant, he wouldn't have been the Premier League's all-time top scorer with 260 goals, a record no one has beaten to this day. The English press also jumped on this story. Numerous outlets highlighted this reopening of the rivalry, calling it a ghost returning to haunt the Premier League. Sports TV shows revisited moments when Shearer and Keane clashed, showing tough tackles, on-pitch arguments, and even direct confrontations. For some pundits, these exchanges only prove how intense the late 90s and early 2000s era really was. And it didn't stop there. Even fans from other clubs joined the debate. Some sided with Keane, saying Shearer did play on the edge of aggression, while others argued that every great striker needs to be tough to survive in the Premier League. In the end, the discussion reignited an old debate. What matters more, the technique and coolness of a striker like Kane, or the strength, grit, and impact of an icon like Shearer. For those who don't remember, or for the younger fans, the rivalry between Alan Shearer and Roy Keane didn't come out of nowhere. It has deep roots that go back to September 2001 at St. James Park. Newcastle versus Manchester United. Two massive clubs, a heated game full of tension. The atmosphere was intense throughout the 90 minutes, with tough challenges and provocations flying both ways. And it all boiled over at the very end. Alan Shearer, as a great captain and leader of Newcastle, did what any experienced player would do. He held on to the ball to waste time, irritating the opposition even more. Roy Keane, known for his explosive temperament and little patience, couldn't handle the provocation. He completely lost his cool, charged at Shearer, and ended up being sent off. The scene turned into total chaos, shoving, players trying to separate them, and Keane storming off the pitch, clashing with anyone in his way. But what made this episode legendary wasn't just a red card. It was Shearer's stance. He didn't back down, he wasn't intimidated, and he even smirked slightly, as if to say, "I got what I wanted." That image stuck in the fans' minds and became part of Premier League folklore as one of the most iconic confrontations in history. Behind the scenes, it said Keane's anger didn't end there. He reportedly promised to settle the score with Shearer at another opportunity, intensifying the personal rivalry between the two. Meanwhile, Shearer, with his sly yet controlled approach, always made it clear that the incident showed not only his cunning on the pitch but also his ability to get under the skin of one of the most feared players of the era. Even today, over 20 years later, that afternoon at St. James Park is still remembered whenever Shearer and Keane's names are mentioned together. It's as if that day sealed a rivalry that goes beyond football. It became part of the mystique and the stories that make the Premier League what it is. And it's fascinating to see how Shearer reacted back then, because it really shows a difference in personality between the two. Immediately after the game, with all the chaos still fresh, Shearer didn't fall into the trap of further provocation, didn't make a scandal, and didn't try to fan the flames. On the contrary, he said he respected Roy Keane, understood his frustration, but that ultimately it was just part of football. This approach was classic Shearer, strong on the pitch, but always mindful of it. He didn't need to make controversial statements because his authority was already cemented through his goals, his leadership, and the weight he carried for Newcastle and the Premier League. It was as if he said, "I've proven myself on the pitch. I don't need to prove anything off it." Meanwhile, Roy Keane went down a very different path. Years later, even retired, he never stopped bringing up that incident with a hint of bitterness, mentioning malice, furtive elbows, and a supposed lack of fair play from Shearer. This constant reminder reinforced the image many have of Keane, a phenomenal player, but one who played on the edge of emotional explosion, often letting anger override professionalism. This contrast between the two characters is what makes the story so compelling. On one side, Shearer, who turned provocations into fuel, yet always maintained control and captaincy composure. On the other side, Keane, the embodiment of intensity, passion, and fury on the pitch, who often seemed to carry the scars of past defeats. It's precisely this difference in approach that explains why Shearer became an absolute icon, remembered not only for his goals but also for his balance as a leader. Keane, despite being a giant in Manchester United's midfield, is still seen as a polarizing figure, surrounded by fights, red cards, and fiery statements. In the end, the episode showed two ways to handle the pressures of football: Shearer with respect and calm, Keane with intensity and resentment. And maybe that's why, even 2 decades later, Newcastle fans always lift their heads when this debate resurfaces, because they know their eternal number 9 walked away from that duel with his reputation intact, even strengthened. And look how history repeats itself. Today, with Harry Kane at Bayern, Shearer's Premier League record of 260 goals still stands firm. But if Kane returns to Tottenham, he could indeed threaten the throne of our number 9. And that's what makes this debate even hotter. Because when Keane says Kane is better than Shearer, he's not just praising the English striker, he's poking the pride of every Newcastle fan. At the end of the day, this provocation from Keane reignites something that perhaps will never die: the rivalry between Newcastle and Manchester United, personified in Shearer versus Keane. The impact is clear. Every time the name of our greatest idol is brought into discussion, the fans unite even more to defend him. And as for Kane, well, if he returns to the Premier League, we'll have another saga to follow, Will anyone ever truly surpass Shearer's record? Fans, deep down we know this. Roy Keane can say whatever he wants, but the story has already been written. Alan Shearer isn't just the Premier League's top scorer. He's the ultimate symbol of Newcastle United. Elbows or not, malice or not, he marked an era, carried a club on his shoulders, and built a legacy that remains untouchable. And that no comment from Keane can ever erase. So now I want to know, do you think Roy Keane still brings up Shearer because he never got over that 2001 clash? Or does he really believe Harry Kane has surpassed our number 9? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And of course, don't forget, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and join this community that breathes Newcastle United every single day. Thanks so much for watching, and see you next time.